である。
見ていたはずの夢はいつも思い出せない。ただずっと誰かを探している。あの日星が降った日、それはまるで
夢の景色のように美しい眺めだった。
By the way, you can request this song. Just comment. Darida. How's they going, great? Just repeat, repeat, repeat. Nice, by the way, bro. Wait, why your chat is not going?
Said check. This is a complete JavaScript course taught by the founder of Scrimba.com. It is a great place to start your JavaScript journey.
Hi there, free code campers, and welcome to this fun and practical introduction to JavaScript. In this course, you are going to solve over 100 different coding challenges. You can do that in two ways, either by cloning the GitHub repository and then solving it locally on your computer, or you can head over to Scrimba.com where there's an interactive version of this course so that you can solve the challenges directly in your browser. Up to you what you want to do. Links are of course provided below. Now, there's no JavaScript prerequisites for this course, but I do assume that you know a little bit of HTML and CSS as we're going to build a few projects that needs some HTML and CSS. But if you don't care about that, you can skip those challenges if you want. No worries. However, the reason is that this course is actually a part of a larger front-end developer career path, which we have at Scrimba, which takes people from zero to hireable as front-end developers. And of course, then HTML and CSS are also part of that. Now, if you have feedback for me, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Pierre Borgen. And if you like this video, please give it a like. I'd really appreciate that. And with that, good luck. Hey, good old buddy, old pal, and welcome to Learn JavaScript, a practical introduction. I am so excited about teaching you this course. And who am I? Well, my name is Pierre. I'm the CEO of Scrimba, and I'm also a front-end developer who's taught a bunch of courses, and over 100,000 students have enrolled in these courses. When I'm not coding, my hobby is to take photographies of myself posing in front of fast cars. But more about that later. What do I mean by this being a practical introduction? Well, it means that you will write the code. I am not going to write the code for you. I'm just going to show you how to do it after you've given it a shot first. Because the only way to learn how to code is to write a lot of code. A clever man once said that. However, there are many ways to write code. There's the old, boring, theoretical, I'm at school way of learning to code. And then there's the much more fun way of learning to code where you actually build stuff from the get-go. And that's what you're going to do. We are going to start by building a subway passenger counter so that you can count people on the subway in case that's one of your interests. For me, it actually was for a period, or it was my full-time job when I was 19. So back in the days, I would actually need such an app. Then we are going to move on with a game, namely a blackjack game. Oh, I just love gambling, so this is going to be so much fun. And then at the end, we're going to be a bit more serious and build a tool for salespeople, namely a so-called lead tracker. And what's so insane about this lead tracker is that it will be a Chrome extension that will deploy to Chrome so that you can use it out in the wild or send it off to a salesperson who might need such a tool because it solves one of the biggest problems salespeople have, which is to browse the web and collect and gather leads that they later can reach out to. So when you have completed these three apps, you will have the ultimate superpower in today's world, which is the power of knowing JavaScript. There is a very low percentage of people in today's world who know JavaScript, so you will no longer be like everyone else at that point. I am so ready to start this course. I hope you are too. So let's just jump into it. Your very first exposure to JavaScript will come through building a passenger counter app. Now you might ask yourself, well, why on earth should we build a passenger counter app? What's the point of that? Well, you'd be surprised. Because when I was 19, right around this time, my full-time job was to count people who entered the subway. So every day I would stand outside in the cold and be like, oh, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people entering the subway this morning. How interesting. And then I would bring up my pen and paper and note down the number 6, which at times was really cold. So it would have been so much better if I had a little people counter app on my Nokia phone so that I could just tap these buttons while having the phone in my pocket. But this was long before I learned to code. So instead, we are going to build this passenger counter app together so that you will learn the basics of JavaScript and so that you are prepared in case you, one time in the future, have to stand outside in the cold counting people who enter the subway. Welcome to this lesson where we are going to take a look at the setup for our people counter app. Here you can see we have a basic HTML structure, which probably looks familiar to you. You can see we have the HTML tag, the head tag, and inside of the body we only have 2 elements, the h1 and an h2. That is the title up here and our counter element. We also have some styling in our index.css. You can check it out here. This is just very basic styling that we're not going to go through because you want to get into the JavaScript as soon as possible. So the first thing we're going to do actually is to simply, inside of our body tag, create a so-called script tag. Like that. Looks just like any other HTML tag. It just says script. And inside of here, you can actually write JavaScript. So inside of this tag, I'm going to write a pretty long JavaScript expression that you probably find a little bit frightening. But don't worry about that. You're not meant to really understand it in this lesson. I just want to demonstrate that this works. So I'm going to start by writing document. That refers to the HTML document itself. And then I'll do dot and get element by ID and then open and close parentheses. Then inside of the parentheses, I'm going to copy the ID of our h2 element. So here we're saying, hey, HTML document, I want to get an element, I want to get it by its ID. And the ID is this count_l. So what do you think we get as a reply? Well, we grab a hold of this element right here. And then we can do dot inner text. Set that equal to, for example, 5. If I now run this code, you'll see that, boom, we have changed the text on the inside of the h2 element, this one right here, from 0 to 5, using JavaScript. And that opens up a whole world of opportunities. It essentially gives us the power to breathe life into our application and turn it into a real-world product that solves problems for people. That's why this is so cool to learn. However, we are not going to write our JavaScript this way here. It's kind of an amateurish way to do it. What we rather want to do is create an index.js file. Like that. Here is our index.js file. It's currently empty. But what I'm going to do is copy this line here, then paste it into the index.js file. And now I'll add an attribute to my script tag called src, which is short for source. And then inside of here, I'm just going to write index.js. We are in the HTML file and the JavaScript file is in the same folder, so I don't need to navigate into any folder or type in a complicated path here. Just write the name of the file. If we now run this code again, you can see that, yes, it still works. So now we have a proper setup for our app and we are ready to get started building our people counter. Let's move on. So today is actually a really important day in your life because you're going to write your first lines of JavaScript. And that is just such a powerful thing to do because you take the first step into a world of opportunities and it might even change your life. So in a year, you might want to celebrate this day as the anniversary, the day you met JavaScript and changed your life for the better. Anyway, the line you're going to write is not this long one right here. It's a little bit too difficult at the moment. I'm actually going to add a double slash in front of it, like that. And you can see that grayed it out. That means that JavaScript will ignore this, since this is now a code comment, not real code. So if we run the code here in the browser, you can see that now we are not modifying the h2 tag anymore. So we are ready here down at line 3 to write our first lines of code. Now, let's think a little bit. What do we need actually to build this subway passenger counter app? Well, the first thing we need is some way to store the count. And that's a natural job for JavaScript because it's kind of like the data we need to store. And when you need to store data, you need to create so-called variables to store the data in. And I'm now going to create a variable called count. And the way we do that is we write let count equal 0. So now we have a variable called count, and it holds a tiny piece of data, namely the number 0. The way you can read this in English is actually let count be 0. So really natural. And let's actually try and verify that actually our count variable does indeed equal 0. Well, we can do that by using a tool that every single developer uses every single day. It's called console.log, and then open and close parentheses. And inside of these parentheses, you can put almost whatever you want. And in our case, we are going to put this count variable here. If we now run the code, you can see that down in the console, at the bottom, we printed out the number 0. And the console is something that the browser provides us with. It's there mainly for debugging purposes, for checking our code like we are doing here, verifying that actually, yeah, I want to take a look at count. I want to print it out to the console and see with my own eyes that it is what I think it is. And indeed it was. And this console you see here is Scrimba's implementation of the console. If you want to check out the real-world console in the Chrome browser, you can, for example, head over to google.com or any page, basically, and then right-click and choose the Inspect option. When you click that, it'll open up this so-called Developer Tools, which shows you a bunch of HTML. As for now, we're not going to worry about that. Instead, just click on the Console option. That'll open up a blank console where you actually, in addition to printing out stuff, which we did down here in the Scrimba console, you can write JavaScript as well. So if you want to write let count equals 5 and then hit enter, and then write console log and then pass in count in the parentheses, and then hit enter, you'll see that it'll log out 5 as well. So the console is available to you in all browsers and is a tool that developers use every single day. So I'm really happy that you've learned about it this early on. Now I actually have a challenge for you. I want you to do two things. First, you're going to create a variable called myAge and then set its value to your age, and then log the myAge variable to the console. So go ahead and do this right now, and then I will show you how to do it as well when you come back. Okay, hopefully that went well. Let's do it together. I'll do let myAge. I happen to be 35 at the moment. Then to console log out my age, I'll do console.log, open and close parentheses, my age. If we run this code, see, now we are printing out both the count and also my age. So we have verified that our variables indeed work as expected. Before we move on, there's one thing I want to show you. And that is to take this line, console logging of my age, and place it above the myAge variable declaration. So now we try to console log myAge before we define it, since JavaScript starts reading at the top and works its way downwards. So what do you think then will happen if I now remove these other console logs and only keep the myAge console log? Just take a guess. Well, what happens is that we get a reference error. Cannot access myAge before initialization. So JavaScript actually understands what we're trying to do. That we're actually referencing a value before it has been initialized. And that simply doesn't work. So now that you are aware of that, let's move on. Okay, so let's return back to our count variable and learn some more advanced concepts, which is that you can actually use JavaScript kind of as a calculator. So instead of just writing let count equals 5, you can do let count equals 5 plus 7, for example. And when you run that code, you'll see 12 in the console. You can do minus, of course. That'll result in -2 in the console. Or you can even divide. That'll be 0.71, bunch of numbers after that. And of course, multiply gives us 35. So there's a lot of mathematical operations built into JavaScript, and you're not going to learn about all of them now. Because now, instead of just hard coding raw numbers, let's try to use variables here instead. Because oftentimes, you won't see this kind of operation. You'll normally see numbers represented as variables in real-world code bases. So removing this right here, for example, do let first batch equals 5. So this was the batch of people that first entered the subway wagon. And instead of hard-coding 5 here yet again, I'm just going to do count equals first batch. Well, what do you think will be logged out here then? Quite correctly, it's 5. Because first batch is 5, count is set to the same as 5. And perhaps there was another batch as well. Second batch, a group of people that entered just before the doors closed. Maybe that was 7 people. Well, then we can do count equals first batch plus second batch. Yes, this works as well. So this is a much more common thing to see in JavaScript, that a variable is set to the value of, for example, 2 other variables added together. Now, I want to comment out this like that. If you wonder how I did that magic of commenting out multiple lines at once, I did simply command plus K plus C, or replacing this with control if you're on a Windows machine. Because what I want to do now, I want to gather this code up here, and then I want to give you a 3-part challenge where you are going to convert your age into dog years. So first create 2 variables, my age and human dog ratio. That is the ratio between human years and dog years. And for the sake of simplicity, we're going to say that 1 human year is about 7 dog years. Now, the calculation is actually a little bit more complicated than that, but that's not that important. The important thing here is the learning. So set then the human dog ratio to 7, and then multiply the 2 variables together, and then store the result in my dog age. Finally, log my dog age to the console. This is great practice. It's important to build up your muscle memory. So go ahead and do this right now, and then return back to the screencast when you want to see how I solve it as well. Okay, hopefully that went well. Now let's do it together. Remove the console so we can get some more space here. And we'll start with my age, which still is 35. And we'll do human dog ratio. That should be 7. Finally, the my dog age should be my age multiplied with human dog ratio. Let's verify that this works by logging out my dog age.
I don't just want to
Play the code, and yes, we can see in the console we get 245. My God, I would be an old dog if I was a dog. I'm really glad I'm a human, actually. So let's move on. Okay, so let's return back to our count example. Now, you've learned how to initialize a variable and even how to do mathematical operations on it, both with hard-coded numbers and with other variables if we need that. And that's all great. However, up until now, we've just been working on the initialization, or the so-called assignment of the variable. What if you want to reassign it, or in plain English, you want to change the variable? Well, then you can do that, for example, down here on line 5, and just do count equals 3. And if we now run the code, you can see that we log out 3 as opposed to 5, because JavaScript starts from the top and runs down and uses the latest value it can find for any variable defined with the let keyword. Now, there are other types of variables that you can't reassign like this, but we'll get to that later. As for now, we're just going to work with the let. And you can do this as many times as you want. If I want to change it even further down to 1, you can see now that JavaScript is only taking into account the line 7 reassignment of the count variable. So this is all good, but it doesn't really help us if we want to increment our people entered count with 1 every time we, for example, click a button. What we then want to do is something like count plus 1, because we want to take the current count, keep track of how many we've counted up until now, and then just increment with 1. The way to do that is actually by simply doing like this. Now, this might look a little bit weird since we have a count on both sides of the equal mark, and probably you've learned at school that the left and right hand side of the equal mark should be completely equal. Now points, so this could, for example, be 10 and 15. I think you get the point. Now I have a challenge for you.
What?
Okay, so you are to create a variable, bonus points. So this could, for example, be a game where your bonus points goes up and down. And I want you to initialize it as 50, and then increase it to 100, decrease it down to 25, and then finally increase it up to 7 for you value. Right now, next up, bonus points equals bonus points again. Increase it, code up. Great job. Let's move on. the HTML and build the interface for our app. And it's not a lot of interface. It's, to begin with, just a button. And later down the line, we're going to create another button. But it has to be written.
Will execute
And you are going to do that.
and
So I want you to follow these instructions. You are to create an increment button. That is the text of the button with the ID of increment-btn. So go ahead and do this right now. Okay, hopefully that went well. Now let's do it together. Button, then I'll create the closing tag. Inside of here, I'll write increment. Could have written count here, but I think increment is more of a technically descriptive word, so let's use that. And ID, increment-btn, like that. If we run this code, we'll see, yes, we indeed have this button, and it is already styled. How convenient.
We have
Check out the CSS for that. We have a general styling for buttons, which are reused across both of our buttons. This is they're using the button selector. And then our increment button and our save button has a specific background, each of them. They're dark red and dark green. Great job doing this. Now the question is, how do we make this button interactive? Because right now, nothing happens if I click it. Well, in the next lecture, we'll go through exactly how to do that. Okay, so now we're going to put the different pieces in this puzzle together and also add a whole new piece. And in order to free up some space in our JavaScript file here, let's just remove this previous exercise and actually write out in pseudocode the procedures that we need to do in order to make this work. So first, we know that we need to store the count somewhere, and we know that we want to initialize it as 0. And then, as I said in the previous lesson, we need to kind of listen for clicks on this button here. When it's clicked, we need to increment our count. And then finally, which we aren't going to do just yet, but I just want to write that procedure out as well so that you know what to expect. We need to change the count-L, this paragraph right here, in the HTML to reflect the new count. So we know how to initialize the count as 0, and we know how to increment the count variable. So to achieve these first three, we need to do this task. That is listening for clicks on the increment button. And that can be done in a multitude of ways. The easiest one is simply in the HTML defining an onClick event listener. You simply write onClick equals and then something in between quotes. So this is an attribute in the HTML, just like the ID is an attribute as well. And inside of here, you write the function that you want to be triggered when the button is clicked. So I'm going to write increment and open and close parentheses here. Now, that probably looks really weird for you. And that's totally okay if you're confused by what's going on here, because we've seen nothing of the word increment in our JavaScript yet. So rightfully so, we need to create that function. I'll do that down here, and I'll use the keyword function. Then the name, increment, open and close parentheses, and then open and close square brackets. So pretty funky syntax right there. And the first time you type them, it feels weird, but over time it becomes second nature. What you write inside of these curly brackets is the so-called body of the function. And that piece of code that is in the body will be executed every time this function is called or invoked. That's the same thing. So just to see it in action, I'm going to write console log, button was clicked. Like that. If we run the code and I click the button, you can see that in the console we see the button was clicked. If I do it again, again and again and again and again, so every single time the button is clicked, this piece of code runs. And it runs because we in the HTMLs are saying, hey JavaScript, when this button is clicked on the onClick event, then I want you to run a function called increment.
On document get elements,
and that's what's happening here. And the JavaScript is like, yeah, for sure. It sits ready and listens for that specific click event. And JavaScript can do that. It pays attention to what the user does on the screen. And when it sees someone continue option, here I have some comment. Okay. So let's pretend that we are building a race car game. So here I have some comments which are meant as pseudocode for the functionalities of the game. And the only real functional part of it is these 5 console for the race understanding and muscle memory. Okay, so let's pretend that we are building a race car game. So here I have some comments which are meant as pseudocode for the functionalities of the game. And the only real functional part of it is these 5 console logs, which are counting down from 5 to 1. So we start the game by setting up the race, and then we do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If I run the code, you can see that is logged to the console. That means that it's go, players are to start racing, and they would be running the race, and then the race is finished, and a winner is declared. And then, of course, we are getting ready for a new race. However, with the current knowledge we have about JavaScript, the way we would count down for a new race would have to be to copy all of these lines and paste them in down here, so that now when we run it, we get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 printed 2 times to the console. However, this isn't good. Anytime you see this kinds of repetitions in your code, you should try to think, is there any way we can refund? Let's go function, parenthesis, that is in read for also roll around.
Why is
writing countdown with open and close parentheses. So now you can see when I run the code, it indeed does the counting.
Why don't you use while?
If I comment this out, it does nothing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this countdown and I'm going to put it all the way here at the top, and then I'm going to call it when we are ready to start the first race, the function. Logger, like that, 42. Now we need to call it my logger, like that. We run the code, and yes, you can see we are logging 42 to the console. Great job. Okay, time for a new challenge. So in our race car game, we have certain laps, and of course we track how much time our players use to race through the laps. And here we have 3 lap times in the variable lap 1, lap 2, and lap 3. And the thing is, if you create a function down here on line 6, it will be able to access these 3 variables from within the function. So what I want you to do now is create a function that simply logs out the sum of all the 3 laps. So that'll be the total racing time for a player. Total lap. The function open plus invoke in here side it only exists inside of this block of code. This is the scope in which the function lives, and that's why we call let variables block scoped. Inside JavaScript, that's things you've learned. Let's now move on. Okay, so now you have to combine some of the things you've learned up until now. We want to laps completed, and in increments, the run 3. Back a few your fresh. Okay, hope how we do it. Like that. Open this variable, the increment lap 1 time. You'll see that. Subway counter app. And as you can see, I've deleted the increment function because I want you to write it instead. It's much better than me writing everything. And you are to do it as a part of turning these first 3 lines of pseudocode into real code. So you're going to initialize the count as 0. You're going to listen for clicks on the increment button. And thus you have to create that function that's triggered when the increment button is clicked. And then you are going to increment the count. And add a final little challenge here, and that is to log it out after the count variable has been incremented. So go ahead and do this right now. And then afterwards, I'll of course show you the solution as well.
Wait, let me make it really quick. Wait. Active.
create that to do work here and the code here. The puzzle, just to do now, is defining an
Na 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 na. Oh, what?
create a function that defining an on, then something is qn. Open and close parentheses here. Now that probably looks really weird. And yes, you can see we are logged the increment button. Thus you have to create that.
What? Na, 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 na. What's wrong? What's wrong? Hmm.
That function that's triggered when the increment button is clicked together. Or we begin with, so count equals 0. Here, as you remember, it's just as we have code in the beginning out, so we have to do something down here at rounding count camel case like that, where you capitalize the first letter of the script we've been using in our HTML and CSS. JavaScript would actually tell us, you can't do that. As you can see, we are getting a red line under this character, which is JavaScript's way of complaining to us, because it's not a valid variable name when you use dash. So we gotta remove it, like that. Now, as always, what do you think we should do now that we've taken one step into the unknown? Well, of course, we're gonna use our good old friend console log, because we have to verify at every single step that we're actually on track. We haven't introduced any bugs. So I'll do console.log and logging out. Count L. And if we bring up the console, we can see actually we're getting what looks like an HTML element in the console. That's pretty interesting. Now, it's actually not a real HTML element. It's more of a representation. It's a model of an HTML element. And it gives us a lot of other opportunities to change it using JavaScript as well. But for now, it's perfectly fine to think of this as just, yeah, that is the element that we are seeing right here. It's JavaScript's representation of that element. Because remember, we said, hey, HTML doc.
Oh, fuck. Great. Update. Yeah.
朝目が覚めるとなぜか寝ている。そういうことが時々ある。
見ていたはずの夢はいつも同じだぜ。ただずっと何か誰かを探している。あの日星が降った日、それはまるで
夢の景色のよう。
Ah, shit. Hindi sinaga nila ata. Eh. Wah. Dareda. Omae wa. Oh shit. Oh no. Wow, what I should do? Oh my god. For what? People doing this? Comment items useless. Oh god. What the? Oh. What the fuck? Ah. Oh god.